thousands of ducks are suddenly released into flooded rice fields right in the middle of the growing season. No fences. No caretakers standing guard. Just ducks, young rice plants, and what looks like pure disorder. At first, it feels like a mistake waiting to happen. Rice plants are delicate. The balance of a paddy field is easily disturbed. One wrong step, one bad decision, and an entire harvest could be destroyed. Yet this seemingly reckless approach is exactly what China turned to in an effort to restore more than 40% of its farmland. Land that had been pushed to the edge by decades of chemical dependence, with nearly 4 million tons of pesticides applied every single year. And then something unexpected happened. After just one growing season, the rice fields didn't fail. They didn't decline. They began to heal. So what was really happening beneath the surface of the water? And why is a method that feels ancient now standing up to modern industrial agriculture? In less than 100 years, farming across the globe has transformed almost completely. Machines took over the work once done by human hands. Transplanters, harvesters, and chemical sprayers reshaped agriculture. Synthetic fertilizers pushed crops to grow faster than ever before. Pesticides made it possible to control insects and diseases on a massive scale. Food production soared. But the hidden cost of this system has become impossible to ignore. Today, agriculture accounts for roughly 20 to 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions, much of it linked to chemical fertilizers and exhausted farmland. Pesticides have devastated soil microorganisms, breaking the natural biological cycles that once kept soils alive and fertile. Study after study now shows the same alarming pattern. More than 40% of the world's agricultural land is slowly losing its ability to regenerate. To keep yields from falling, farmers are forced to apply more chemicals year after year, just to stay in the same place. And nowhere is this risk more serious than in rice farming. More than half of the world's population depends on rice as a staple food. Rice paddies are not just fields. They are one of the foundations of global food security. They form one of the pillars that global food security depends on. When this delicate system starts to break down, the danger doesn't stay limited to a single field or a single farmer. It spreads outward, affecting the entire food network that sustains billions of people. This is how a silent cycle begins. Each season, agricultural ecosystems grow weaker, less resilient, and more dependent on outside intervention. So if modern agriculture is now producing its own crises, where does the true solution come from? The irony is hard to ignore. The path forward may lie in methods that existed long before synthetic chemicals ever entered farming. For hundreds of years across East Asia, rice fields were never treated as flat production surfaces designed for one crop alone. They were managed as living systems, where rice plants and ducks shared the same space. Shortly after rice seedlings were transplanted, ducks were released into the flooded paddies. All day long, they moved through the shallow water, feeding on insects and young weeds, while lightly churning the surface of the mud. Their waste returned nutrients directly to the soil, naturally replenishing what the rice plants removed. This reduced the need for external fertilizers without relying on machines or chemical sprays. No heavy equipment. No pesticides. And yet, yields remained stable for generation after generation. Historical farming records show that the rice-duck system has been in continuous use for more than 6 centuries. Long enough to demonstrate that its success is not based on maximizing output at any cost, but on maintaining biological balance. Within this system, large-scale pest outbreaks were uncommon. Soils remained productive instead of depleted. And rice fields were able to support themselves, season after season. When ducks are first introduced into a rice field, concern is almost inevitable. The plants are still young. Their stems are tender. It seems like a single careless step could destroy the entire crop. But that fear fades quickly. A clear pattern begins to emerge. Ducks instinctively avoid the rice plants themselves. Instead, they target what moves in the water and grows faster than the rice. The very organisms farmers struggle hardest to control. brown planthoppers, stem borers, leafhoppers, and a wide range of aquatic insects become the duck's primary food source. As the flock constantly moves through the paddies, pest life cycles are interrupted at their earliest stages. Within just a few weeks, pest populations drop dramatically, without a single chemical spray. At the same time, the duck's constant movement agitates the water's surface, disrupting mosquito larvae and other harmful organisms, drastically cutting down the need for chemical pesticides. Weeds, too, lose their opportunity to thrive. The ducks nibble on young shoots, duckweed, barnyard grass, and even wild rice, plants that normally compete with the crop for nutrients. Every step they take disturbs weed roots, preventing dense mats from forming. This continuous activity has another surprising effect: it introduces oxygen into both the water and the top layer of soil. Anaerobic conditions are reduced, soil compaction is minimized, and rice roots can grow deeper and stronger. Researchers often describe this as a kind of natural tilling that happens throughout the day, powered entirely by the ducks. Meanwhile, their droppings are spread evenly across the field, acting as a steady, organic fertilizer rich in nitrogen and organic matter. This slow, balanced nutrient supply nourishes both soil and rice plants more effectively than chemical fertilizers, while avoiding pollution of nearby water sources. But for all this seeming chaos to become an advantage, farmers must carefully orchestrate the ducks' release. Timing is critical. Ducks are introduced 2 to 3 weeks after transplanting, once the rice is strong enough to handle their movement without bending or breaking. Too early, and fragile seedlings can be damaged. Too late, and pest and weed control loses its effectiveness. Density is just as important. Studies from China and Japan show that the ideal range is usually 150 to 300 ducks per hectare, depending on soil, water depth, and rice variety. Too few ducks, and the biological impact is too weak to replace chemicals. Too many, and the water clouds, roots get stressed, and photosynthesis slows. Finally, timing the removal of ducks is equally crucial. When the rice enters the panicle initiation stage, the period when it starts preparing to flower, the ducks must be withdrawn entirely. This is the most sensitive phase of the rice's life cycle. Even a small disturbance can directly reduce the number of grains each panicle produces. In rice duck farming systems tracked in China and Japan, pesticide use often drops by 50 to 70%, while spending on chemical fertilizers falls by 20 to 40%. This translates to a significant reduction in overall input costs per hectare, sometimes starting as early as the very first growing season. For small-scale farmers, this isn't just about saving money, it can be a matter of survival, especially as the price of agricultural inputs continues to rise. But the advantages don't stop at cost savings. The rice itself becomes more valuable. Rice grown under rice duck systems is often labeled as ecological rice or low-chemical rice, prized for its reduced reliance on synthetic inputs. In many Asian markets, this rice can command prices 10 to 30% higher than conventionally grown varieties. Consumers are willing to pay extra for produce they can trust, rice that is safer, more sustainable, and transparently grown. Meanwhile, the duck flock becomes an additional economic asset. With abundant natural food available in the fields, ducks grow rapidly with minimal commercial feed and very little need for antibiotics. At the end of the season, farmers can sell duck meat or eggs, creating a new income stream independent of rice prices and helping diversify financial risk. In many cases, revenue from the ducks alone is enough to cover a large portion of rice production costs, turning this ecological farming method into a self-sustaining economic model. As chemical inputs are gradually reduced, rice fields begin to transform in ways long forgotten. Water clears. Algae levels decline. The pungent odor of anaerobic decay fades away. Life slowly returns. Beneficial insects are the first to reappear, followed by frogs, small fish, dragonflies, and waterfowl. The rice field stops functioning like a mechanical starch factory and begins reclaiming its role as a vibrant, living ecosystem. Even more striking, studies have shown that methane emissions drop by 20 to 30% compared to conventional, chemical-intensive rice farming. The continuous movement of ducks aerates the soil, breaking up the anaerobic conditions that drive methane production in flooded paddies. In other words, these fields aren't just reducing harm, they are actively helping fight climate change. On a deeper level, the rice duct system represents more than just less damaging agriculture. It is a form of regenerative farming, where soil health is restored, natural cycles are reconnected, and ecosystems can sustain themselves across multiple growing seasons, without constant chemical intervention. Of course, this approach requires skill. Farmers must carefully time the release of ducts, manage flock density, monitor water levels, and keep a close eye on rice growth. Even small errors can turn potential ecological benefits into production risks. Predators add another layer of challenge. Snakes, foxes, feral dogs, and birds of prey can cause serious losses if the ducts aren't adequately protected. In regions with labor shortages or limited capacity to supervise, this becomes a significant barrier. Moreover, not every environment is suited to this method. Fields lacking stable water, paddies on steep terrain, or soils heavily contaminated with chemicals may not support the delicate biological balance the system relies on. The lesson is clear: the rice duct model is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It must be carefully selected, adapted, and applied under the right conditions to work effectively. When the idea of using rabbits to restore the desert first emerged, Wong knew one thing with absolute certainty: for the rabbits to survive, he first needed a plant tough enough to withstand scorching winds and shifting sand. Out of dozens of candidates, only one species fit the bill: the willow. Willows became the backbone of the emerging ecosystem. Their roots reach nearly 90 meters deep, tapping into water reserves that most other plants cannot access. Once established, these roots anchor the sand, reduce the wind's destructive force, and create a cooler, more stable microclimate, conditions strong enough for life to begin. The willow wasn't just a plant. It was the ignition switch for the entire ecological chain. Turning willows into the foundation of a desert ecosystem was far from easy. For centuries, people had struggled to keep trees alive in places where the soil becomes hot enough to scorch insects in mere minutes. In Kubuki, the wind is more than a breeze. It carries sand like razor-sharp blades, capable of stripping bark and uprooting trees in just a few days. On top of that, daytime temperatures on the surface often exceed 70 degrees Celsius, making germination nearly impossible. Planting a willow here is not as simple as digging a hole and dropping in a sapling. It is a constant battle with nature. Planting teams must locate tiny pockets of hidden moisture beneath the sand, the last lifelines of the desert. When they find a suitable spot, they dig deep pits and protect them immediately with wire mesh and temporary barriers to shield against the next violent gust of wind. Young willows are treated with special moisture-retaining solutions and anchored with wooden frames to prevent them from being ripped out overnight. Water must be used sparingly. Drip irrigation delivers just enough moisture for the roots to sense life and push themselves deeper into the soil, clinging desperately to the earth, their only chance to survive in this relentless sea of sand. Once the first clusters of willow trees grew large enough to cast shade and retain moisture in the soil, Wong added the next crucial element to his restoration plan: Rex rabbits. These rabbits were never released into the wild. Instead, they were raised in carefully managed ecological farms, each animal carrying both economic and environmental value. Their meat became a clean, sustainable food source. Their fur was used in high-end fashion. Their organs supported traditional medicine. But what truly made the Rex rabbit an ecological powerhouse was something far simpler: its droppings. Rabbit manure is packed with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, nutrients the desert soil completely lacked. When scattered across the sand, it didn't just fertilize the land. It helped loose, shifting sand bind together, forming a moist, nutrient-rich layer of humus. Even more remarkable, Rex rabbits cannot digest grass seeds. Every time they dig or forage, intact seeds are mixed into their droppings and spread across the land. Each seed comes wrapped in a natural fertilizer packet, giving it the chance to germinate even under the harshest desert conditions. The result? Vegetation began to appear naturally, gradually expanding green coverage with minimal human intervention. Thanks to the rabbits, the ecosystem slowly organized itself into a self-regulating system. Willow canopies provided shade and a constant food source for the rabbits. In return, the rabbits returned what the desert lacked most: nutrient-rich humus. This new soil retained moisture, reduced erosion, and created the foundation for stronger willow growth. The closed loop transformed every hectare of barren sand into a humus-producing powerhouse, generating over 5 tons per year. In just 3 to 5 years, stretches of rock-hard desert were converted into fertile, productive farmland. As the model expanded, over 200 million willow trees formed a vast green barrier, slashing wind speeds by up to 90% and stopping more than 15 million tons of sand from shifting each year. Regions that were once defenseless against relentless sandstorms were transformed. Greenery now spreads across 700 to 800 square miles, providing a strong foundation to scale up the Rex rabbit farming system. As the ecosystem stabilized, the population of 1.2 to 2 million Rex rabbits not only regenerated the soil, but also became a key economic driver. They generated over 100 million won annually, supplying thousands of families with a sustainable income in areas previously thought uninhabitable. Ultimately, the story of rice and ducks is more than a farming technique, it's a lesson. As modern agriculture confronts its limits, the solution may not lie in ever more complex machinery or chemicals. Instead, it may emerge from a deeper understanding of nature itself. Amid synthetic fertilizers, mechanized fields, and the constant push to increase yields, ecosystems that were once overlooked are quietly demonstrating the power of balance. Perhaps the future of global food security will not be built on technology alone, but on these ancient, time-tested principles, old yet strikingly relevant in today's world.